This is a message to all my supporters of this podcast. I'm introducing a new supporters program. You can contribute a small amount as a one-off payment to show your love for this podcast. Thank you in advance for all your contributions. I just wanted to let you know before we start the podcast that I am doing an online podcast course, how to be able to create, get your guests, scale it and monetize it. So please do go to abmpodcastcourse.co.uk and go into the contact us bit. I'm looking for new people to be able to be a podcast creator and really to be able to develop their skills and knowledge into a podcast. So as I said, go to abmpodcastcourse.co.uk and sign up. Thanks. This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. I'm a corporate employee with an entrepreneurial mindset. This podcast will help and support you with new ideas about business. These are my thoughts, ideas, and comments. Today we're speaking to Christopher Wallace, who has a varied career, but is based mainly in sales and marketing. Hello, Christopher. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Yeah, very good. Very good. So we just talked beforehand. How is COVID-19 affecting you?
Well, it certainly made my work day a little bit choppy. Have two small, school-age children at home. So, in addition to teaching people the area of a rectangle, I'm trying to do my day job. But our business is unique in the sense that we work a lot, with sales and marketing and customer experience. So while organizations are definitely trying to figure out, how to spend their money, they're also trying to figure out how to innovate. So it's been really an interesting time, and one I think where a lot of great ideas are going to come out of.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're still investing in innovation on your products and your clients' products.
Yeah, I mean, we are putting in, a lot of our time. We've taken some of the work that we do, some of the services that we provide, and really supplemented them with some things that are a little bit more focused on the work from home employees and things like that. Not a complete pivot, but just trying to meet the needs that our clients have in the the immediate timeline. And when we thought it was a couple weeks, that was one thing. When we realized it was going to be months, we figured people are going to need some help in the short term, so we've got to be there to help them.
And where are you based? How is it affecting your your day-to-day life?
So I'm in Philadelphia in the U.S.
Okay,
My team, I would say about half our team is in Philadelphia, where our headquarters is, and then the rest are sort of scattered throughout the country. And so, I mean, just like a lot of folks, a lot of Zoom calls, right? We're doing a lot of Zoom calls. I found that interactions with clients, it's a lot of them are large corporate clients. Most of them have everybody really has pushed to a work from home model. So we've had a lot of interaction, a lot of touch points with our stakeholders, but it's been remote. Some people are more comfortable doing it than others.
Yeah.
But our team is scattered, and we're making the best use of the technology we can.
So you had quite a lot of your team that worked remotely, did they? Already?
That's correct. Yeah. So we've operated as sort of a semi-virtual company for a long time. So it wasn't completely foreign to us. I can't believe that we didn't use Zoom more before. And we had Zoom accounts before, and we used them for work, but not as much as we have now. But the videos, it's not like being there, but it's at least a reasonable proxy for actually being there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you for that. So let's go back to your origin story. So you did a Bachelor of Science of PR and History. So tell me about that.
Origin story make me sound like a superhero.
That's
probably the best.
I always call it an origin story because I find it interesting to where people started from. You can see whether there's a linear continuation of those degrees, or sometimes people pivot very early on and realize a law degree just wasn't my thing at all. So
it's a great point. So thinking about the degree, it's funny when I registered for college and I went through my orientation. This was well before my freshman year started, the spring before. I actually marked my major as public relations, and I graduated with that major. So from April of the spring before I started college till I got my diploma, I was a public relations major. Communications was something that I wanted to study. It was something I wanted to, I don't want to say get better at, because I think it was a very natural thing, but really the art around communication is something that I was always passionate about, and has served me extremely well. Kind of taking a public relations degree into the sales and marketing world really isn't that far of a leap, but learning how to communicate with people and write a press release and write good business emails was something I was doing as a freshman, and it was great training that served me to this day.
And why did you go from a PR, which is a particular slant, public relations is a particular slant, and you go into a sales role? You say there's not a great leap between them, but why didn't you pursue more the PR route? Why did you go to sales?
To be completely honest, I didn't want to do the agency thing. When I was graduating from college, a lot of my classmates were going to work for big agencies, and the agency model was tough. I think I sort of realized early on that my first job out of school, I did events. So I did call it event marketing. And again, there's this PR marketing, it wasn't that big of a leap, but what I've realized over time, especially, is PR is sales. It's just a label put on it for people who don't like to say they're in sales. It's the same thing. It's the same skill set. It's the communication. You're just selling ideas instead of things. And the skill set's very much the same. So in hindsight, it doesn't feel like a big leap to me.
So what was, I read you did hard surface products. What are hard surface products?
So the layperson name for that would be hardwood flooring, tile, laminated flooring, things like that. But when I went to work, in my first job in sales out of school was with a large flooring manufacturer here in the States, global brand, but primarily here in the States. And I was a product rep. I was a manufacturer's rep for a large company. So I sold hardwood flooring, drove a big truck around, and went to flooring dealers and talked about the latest and greatest in hardwood flooring.
So a lot of the people that I've spoken to talk about, I was going to say fondly, but they talk about sales roles early on in their career as a good foundation for the rest of their careers, because you have to be persistent, you have to learn communication, as you said, and sort of develop your own style and build up confidence on sales. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I always say that I don't think I found sales as a career. I think I was born into sales. It's just one of those things where, I do believe that good salespeople can be trained and things like that, but there are people that sort of have natural leanings toward that type of role, extroverted. My father was in sales. My brothers are both in sales. It's sort of the family trade, so to speak. But I definitely think back to, that first role in sales that I had really opened up my career in a lot of different ways. I had worked in the sports business prior to that in a few different roles in both, media and PR, but also in marketing. And getting experience in sales really helped me kind of get back into that world for a good number of years, working in both the sports and entertainment industry, but on the business side, doing sales as opposed to event operations or communications. And it opened up a lot of doors for me, for sure.
So I read that you worked for the PGA Tour.
Yeah.
So did you meet any celebrity golfers?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hi, I'm Alex, the host of X Health Show. Meet the future of healthcare. Think X-Men, that's X Health. Actual superheroes behind programming living cells to cure cancer once and for all. Tech that detects preterm delivery in seconds, brain-computer interface, or apps that employ AI to match you, your disease, with the best treatment. X Health Show brings to you visionaries who push the boundaries of healthcare from Switzerland, the heart of Europe, and the most innovative country in the world. Let me introduce you to their startups. Head to X Health Show, meet the future of healthcare. Happy to greet you there.
I've met a lot of celebrity golfers over the years. I had a lot of fun working in the sports business. Yeah, I mean, I've met some of the top players in the world. I've never met Tiger Woods, but I've met some pretty well-known figures in the game of golf, and had a lot of fun. I spent a number of years both in college and out of school working in the game of golf. And I will tell you, it's one of those things. I absolutely love that game. I didn't grow up playing. I really like the sport. I like being around it. But when one of your passions becomes your job, or one of your hobbies becomes your job, better yet, it can be tough. It can be tough. You sort of develop an interesting relationship with that hobby. But I did enjoy being around the game for a number of years, and fortunate to meet some pretty interesting folks.
Do you still play now?
I'm trying to get my 9-year-old and my 7-year-old into playing, right. And they got going last year a little bit. Yeah. With the COVID, we haven't really been out much, yeah. But golf courses just reopened, so we're hoping to get out. But if I can get them playing, my golf career, I think, will take off a little bit. But until then,
we've still got plenty of years left, haven't you? Golfers play to their 50s.
Yeah, it's true. I'm hoping to get out a little bit more, but I'd love to play. I just running a business and raising 2 young children. It's hard to find time.
So just on that, so sort of meeting professional sportsmen, being around them on the business side, not on the golfing side. Did you learn anything? Did you get some like sage advice from anyone that you were working with that sort of helped your career in that way?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I can say, so this is what I'll say about being around the sports business. Some of the best, probably the single best lesson I've ever learned in my career really relates to, what I'm going to call customer service and customer experience. Yeah. When people pay and when people spend their leisure dollars, their expectation for what they get is really high, and it should be. And from, when I was in college working in the minor league baseball industry to, working, at a very exclusive high-end private country club, representing the PGA Tour brand out of school, those expectations don't really change if somebody's buying a $7 ticket or they're buying a $100,000 private country club membership. Yeah. People have high expectations, and, really having a service focus and making sure that you are looking at the money that they're spending and always finding ways to deliver value for them, right? Delivering value for a $7 minor league baseball ticket, frankly, the fundamentals of that aren't much different than delivering value for somebody on the golf course. And, just kind of, treating people with that service first mentality is something that I really learned early on from the sports business.
So we're going to delve into your beliefs and your way you have fashioned your sort of business, your latest business on employees and employee customer service. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Your MBA that you did at Temple University, why did you think you needed to do an MBA, and what did it actually, how did it assist you?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I would say that at the time I was very much in climb the corporate ladder mode. That's where I was in my career. That was my mentality. But the advice I always give people when they think about going back and getting a graduate degree is I always ask people, is at least half of the reason you're going back because you want to learn? And the reason I ask that question is you could always tell the people that did it because their company paid for it, or they felt like they were going to get a raise, or whatever the case may be. And they weren't really in it. And I don't think they got as much out of it as they could have. But I feel fortunate in the sense that I really approached it with a huge appetite to learn more. And I didn't have very much of a financial background. I was strong on the communications and sales and marketing side, but not on the finance side, not on the strategy side. And I've actually done some interviews with the Temple folks for the MBA program, for some publications and things like that. And I'll say to this day, it's the single best investment I have ever made. The vocabulary that I learned, the things that I'm now able to implement in running a business, I'm using my MBA every single day. The interesting thing is I got it to climb the corporate ladder. And about a year after I finished my degree, I found myself in a spot where I had a chance to start my own business. Yeah. And while I think it would have helped me on the corporate side, it's been my lifeline, being an entrepreneur. So
that's really interesting because, as you say, most people who take MBAs have a particular, often a financial angle that they want to climb the corporate ladder in sort of finance and investment banking, but what would you say was, you mentioned that the finance and strategy was areas which you weren't particularly strong on. What did you learn on, let's just say, strategy that you didn't have part of your armor before?
You know what? The trick with an MBA is you have to boil it down into a couple things you can always remember and a couple of truisms that you can really stick to. And the first year of my MBA, it was almost like the 2 years of it were set up into really gigantic themes that were threaded through all the classes. And the first year was all about value. The first year was all about thinking about how a business, all the strategy courses and the way marketing was woven in. It was all about value. It was all about setting a business up. And this included the human capital and the people side of the business, but setting it up to have a strategy that is all around a world-class value proposition that you could deliver to customers. And the second year was all about alignment. It was all about making sure that you were setting up processes that were going to stitch back to that value point. So when I think about it, it's almost like it was the tale of 2 degrees. It was how do you understand and recognize and build around value for a business? And the second piece is how do you get all the other pieces of the business aligned, even though it might not seem that way? How do you get finance aligned around value? How do you get people aligned around value? And man, that has really stuck with me over the years. Those two big value points. So when I'm thinking about, when we started interview is really kind of the third sort of young organization that I've been involved with. But when we started, we put months in before we even launched the business on defining what the value was, defining what that story was. And then since then, we've continued to stitch back and align all those other pieces to the value.
So it reminds me of sort of reading Simon Sinek and understanding your why. It sounds like your first year was understanding the value that you add, the why you're doing these things.
Yeah, I think, really and I'm familiar with Sinek's work. I would say that the value that I'm talking about is really your customer value proposition, right? It really was, why are you in business? Why are you, and not in terms of like philosophically, but what is it that you offer to customers? What is it that you can be world-class at? That type of thing. The second part really, I think, aligns a lot with the Simon Sinek stuff, which is especially related to people. How do you help people understand that value, what it is you do as an organization? How do you help them see themselves as a big part of that value proposition? How do you crystallize their role in delivering on that? That's really, to me, the second year is getting all those other pieces aligned.
So it's really interesting you say about value proposition. So I understand that you're adding value and building up understanding the value, but just talk a little bit about a value proposition and what it means to you.
Yeah, to us, value proposition, and that's really your promise to the customer, right? We always talk about brand. What is a brand? We always talk about brand as a collection of promises. Value proposition is, to us, a very succinct way at looking at how you impact the lives of your customers. What can you do for them that makes you worth doing business with versus going to somebody else? It's really that differentiation piece. It's how, when people look at how much they paid you, how do you get them to look at what they paid you and feel to themselves, man, that's a bargain. I got what I wanted and then some. Yeah. And even that goes back to what I was talking about working in the sports world of, even if somebody pays $7, how do you make sure that what you delivered to them felt like it was worth more than that?
Yeah. So you went on and you were a founding partner in Insight Sales, which was empowering salespeople. So what did you teach? What were you part of the teaching side, or were you part of the business side?
So part of the business side. It's funny because Insight was the first business we started. That business we ended up merging. We ended up selling that practice to another firm, and worked with that organization for a couple of years. But Insight we were young. It was our first. I say we, myself and my business partner, and we were kind of figuring a lot of it out as we went. And over time, we sort of got, for lack of a better phrase, typecast into the sales training world. Yeah. And we felt like what we did was very different from that. And the form it took was very different than sales training, but we sort of got lumped in with that sales training. So I would say to a little bit, it was on the learning side of it, but we were typically working directly with sales teams, not really working through their training departments. We weren't a vendor to the training department. It usually ended up being the sales and or marketing teams.
And then you moved on to, was it the same partner that you worked with into Interview Group?
That's correct. Yep.
So just on that, tell me a little bit about your co-founder, your partner. Is it a relationship? Are you opposites? Do you have defined roles? How have you sort of worked that relationship out?
Yeah, so we've gotten better over time. Her name is Diana Finley. Diana and I were coworkers. Probably the best part of my origin story here, or at least the company's origin story, is we were coworkers. We worked in the entertainment business together, and we both ended up leaving as a result of there was a merger that was done, and we were going to have to move. And neither one of us wanted to move our families from the Philadelphia area. And she had just had her second child, and she took about a year off to raise her daughter. And I ended up calling her up saying, this business that I have, it's sort of taking off and I need some help. Are you interested? And she spent a day with me going around meeting with a few people. And she said, I'm looking to get back into something. And it was the first month, it was 10 hours a week. The second month, it was 25 hours a week. And it's probably been 60 hours a week every month since. And that was in 2013.
You eased her in.
So we got, yeah, exactly right. It was 0 to 60 really, really fast. I don't know the conversion to kilometers, so I apologize. 60 miles per hour. Yeah. But the sort of the evolution of our relationship really has been in starting Interview. It was a chance for us to say, okay, we've kind of done this twice. Third place we'd worked together, but 2 times with young ventures, and we felt like we had a chance to really get it right the third time around. And we've done a better job of separating roles and responsibilities than we ever have. I'm primarily focused on I'm sort of our de facto chief revenue officer. I'm really focused on the sales and marketing and strategy side of the house. And Diana is very much our operations and client services. So finance, human capital, but then really our products, our services, our talent, all of that, delivering for our clients is all Diana's world.
And so were you entrepreneurial from an early age, or did you sort of develop into it?
It's a really hard thing to say that I was from an early age, because I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. I mentioned I went back to get my MBA to sort of climb the corporate ladder. But, I think back to those early days of selling raffle tickets for our little league, or, all this stuff we sort of did as kids that, I think about my brothers and I and all of our adventures growing up. And I guess looking back on it, it feels like maybe we always were entrepreneurial. I sort of denied that. I always thought that I was the conservative one. So I never thought I'd actually strike out on my own and do that. But sort of the MBA gave me the tools that I needed and the confidence to do it. And when, the opportunity sort of all came about, I sort of refer to myself as an accidental entrepreneur, because I never thought in my professional career I would do that. But the opportunity sort of came up and I jumped on it. I was smart enough not to let it pass.
It's a really interesting point you make about that, because entrepreneurs now are very fashionable, and you've got all the influencers who are entrepreneurs that everyone follows on social media. But it's interesting you say that you were an accidental entrepreneur, because a lot of people, or there's people that I've worked with, and they've struck off and gone their own way. And the actual shift in working for somebody else to the shift of working for yourself or your partnership, there's actually quite a difference between that sort of definition of working to make someone else a profit to working to make yourself a profit.
There definitely is. And I can say that I'm really glad that I did it when I was young. And that would maybe be a piece of advice is I was younger. It's funny to think, like, I don't know that I felt young at the time, but I really was. I was 31 when I started my business. And that was there's no substitute for experience and getting some of those battle scars of being an entrepreneur fairly early on. To be 40 now and have that much time under my belt and really have that seasoning is extremely valuable. So, heading into my 40s, I feel much more equipped to be able to run a good business and enduring business than I did at 31.
Awesome. So, so let's talk a little bit about marketing and sales and your approach in interview. So how can branding positively impact businesses? Because there's been a lot of discussion 10, 15 years ago about branding, and then we had personal branding with social media and things like that. How can branding really impact businesses?
So, and I'm going to go back to my definition. I look at brand. A brand is a collection of promises you make to your customers.
Right.
It is who you tell your customers you are. Okay. And I believe that, especially in this day and age, and I only believe that the current crisis that the world is facing is only going to accelerate this, that brands really need to stand out and they need to differentiate themselves in different ways than they have in the past. I truly believe that brands are going to become synonymous with the experience that you have with them. I really believe that the age of, I read an article this morning actually out of the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania here in Philadelphia. And the article said, customer experience needs to be the number one priority for every CEO right now. And you read the article and it's hard to argue against that. We're at a time right now where companies are going to be judged not on the quality of the product they make, but on the quality of the experience that they deliver around their product. Yeah. And I truly believe that brands will be differentiated primarily by experience, not products going forward. So to me, the age of brand and the age of customer experience are going to converge in a faster way than I ever thought I would see.
So let's just explore that. I'm going a little bit on a tangent, but on the employee experience so what role do employees play in sort of the marketing message?
So a lot of organizations, and we've done research on this, a lot of organizations, people look at it as marketing are just sort of those people that make ads, okay? Well, those ads are all part of your brand, and that brand is your promise. So any ad that you deliver is a promise you are making to your customer. It's trying to entice them. Marketers are trying to drive action at the consumer, at the buyer level.
Yeah.
If that works, if a marketer is able to attract attention and attract a buyer to potentially show up to evaluate a purchase, in most cases, that purchase is going to be made through a person. In most cases, I saw a statistic the other day from an associate of ours who's a professor at Harvard. And his stat was last year, I believe this was in North America, or US or North America, 89% of dollars spent by consumers were spent through traditional means. Only 11% were spent through e-commerce. So there's still a lot of person-to-person interaction. Even if you made an e-commerce purchase, the opportunity to have an interaction with a representative from that brand, whether it was in a retail store or a customer service rep, or you have a return or exchange, you are still interacting with people from that brand a large majority of the time. What we look at the key to the employee being, if they are not representing those promises and understanding the role they play in delivering that promise, there's a big disconnect. There's a lot of dilution between what the marketers are spending a lot of money to advertise and what people are experiencing. And we just don't think in this day and age, and especially now, that companies can afford to spend what they spend on marketing and not sort of back up the bets that they're making on marketing and advertising with a really strong foundation in delivering that experience.
So do you think culture in an organization is critical to have the right people that are pulling in the same direction, that they are communicating the company's brand? Where does culture for the employees and the business come in all of this mix?
Yeah, I see culture being an outgrowth of the brand. I really do. I think, and there might be CMOs who will hear me say that might cringe a little bit, but I think the role of the CMO has become more critical, in this era than it ever has been. And I do think that the role that the marketing department plays in helping drive culture throughout the organization, the CMO has to really help if they're working with their human capital, their human resources partners, they really need to help make sure that not only are they weaving that into the culture of the organization, so the brand becomes sort of a living, breathing organism, not just words. That's the risk, is that the brand just becomes words. Well, culture sort of becomes indoctrinating the brand, so to speak. So the brand happens from the inside out. So we see the marketing department needing to play a significant role in helping inform the culture that will develop. And you look at companies like Patagonia, and they hire for culture, they hire for brand. The people who recruit for Patagonia know what their brand is. They know people that will fit that brand, and they hire for it. So we truly believe that it's almost to the point where brand is the external and culture is the internal, but they're almost one and the same.
And where does this come from? Does it come from top down, or does it come from bottom up?
That's a hard one. The answer is both, if I may be so bold. Sure. We think it has to be a two-way dialogue between, and that's the way we set up all of our support and our engagements with our clients, is that it's a two-way dialogue. We believe that the front lines and gathering feedback from the front lines, the people who talk to customers, needs to inform strategy. But when strategy starts to trickle back down, there has to be some level of execution in there. The people who are setting the strategy you got to give it a try, so to speak, right? What happens is the strategy people send it down to the front lines. In so many cases, you have customer service reps, salespeople, even technicians who look at the stuff that they're getting and are like, who came up with this? They've never done my job. They don't get it. So they don't do it. They don't execute. Yeah. And good strategy dies on the vine because it was never sort of translated in the right way for those frontline people. Conversely, sometimes strategy isn't great, and they could use some input from the frontline people. So it's sort of a chicken or the egg, but we look at more as a virtuous cycle that happens throughout the organization from top to bottom and in reverse.
That's really interesting because, as you say, when you think about companies that have great strategy, so let's just take Apple for an example. They've had some really smart leaders and some great strategies, whether it's the iPhone or the iPad, but they've always had great customer service of the people in the shops. You felt you walked into an Apple store and there was something special about going into an Apple store. So it's interesting that you say that in that example, it was coming from both directions. The people believed in the strategy and the people were implementing the strategy at the same time.
You're right. And I would say that the Apple example is probably the most extreme example you could possibly choose, because it is the most, I still say to this day, there's not a company on earth, there's not another company on earth outside of Apple that simply who they are and what their brand stands for, people will buy their products. They're the only one in my mind who their products, because of the whole ecosystem, stands completely alone, and people will show up and buy time and time again. Everybody else really needs to duke it out, right? Everybody else has true competition. I don't think that Apple actually has true competition. And there are plenty of other brands where they don't have the luxury of having that cult of personality brand or that cult following brand and cult of personality brand that Apple's had over the years. So they need to work harder, right? They need to work harder to differentiate themselves through their brand, through their experience, through their people. And it's not an easy task. It's not as simple as, again, marketers saying, we have a client that one time said to me, he pointed out of his office window and he said, we're great at putting a message up on that billboard, but making sure that message comes through when somebody in one of our call centers gets a phone call, wow, we really struggle at that. And that's what, day in and day out, companies are struggling in the trenches to connect those two concepts.
Interesting. So we've talked about sales and marketing. How do they align effectively as two different entities? But there is obviously crossover within the two. How can you effectively get sales and marketing aligning well?
Well, not to sound like a relationship therapist, although we feel like that sometimes working with sales and marketing, but listening. I mean, I'm going to be completely honest and say it's that simple, that the first step is listening. What we do with our clients is we work with marketers primarily, think of it this way. Marketing's the client, but sales is ultimately our buyer. We look at the sales team. If we can get the sales team bought in to the messages that the marketing team is putting out there, that's how we're going to get alignment. And the best way to get alignment is to listen. We understand their point of view. We created a proprietary information gathering exercise. It's basically a market research tool that we repurposed for internal audiences. So just as you'd go out and ask your customers what they think of your products and your brand, we do the same thing, only we do it with the people who represent the brand. So, we call it the voice of the internal customer, right? The brand transfer study is the name of the tool, but we want to know what those internal customers think of the brand. And by understanding their perspective, we know how to reach them. Just like marketers do market research for their customers and their buyers, we're doing that internal research to find out, okay, this person stands in front of a customer all day long, talking about your brand, about your products and services. Wouldn't it be nice to know what they actually think of you? Do they like your products? Do they think they stand out in the marketplace? Do they have confidence in your products? We look at it as that brand, that moment for their brand is that customer interaction, that customer conversation. We give them a point of view on what that customer is likely to hear from their organization. And simply by listening, the first step to alignment, you kind of cross that first hurdle of alignment by understanding what the other person's perspective is. And then we can really work to try to connect the dots better. But asking and listening is the first step in that process.
And so what sort of market research tools do you use? So I did a user research course about 2 years ago, which has been really helpful to be able to understand sometimes internally how people view a product or service or a project. What sort of techniques do you use to listen to get that message?
So we worked with a company. We worked in conjunction with a company that was doing market research. They were gathering voice of the customer data. And it was essentially what they were doing is they'd work for either an agency or the brand themselves. And they would come back and say, here's what your customers think of you. Here's where you have superiority against your competition. Here's where you're inferior compared to your competition. And they would give this holistic view of how the consumer viewed the brand. And we looked at that and we said, well, why couldn't that exercise be done internally? If you want to know what the theory was, if marketing is based on customer research, right? You do market research, you learn what the customer wants, and you build messages to reach that customer, right? It's really not that hard of an equation. Learn what they want, build messages that are going to reach their needs and be tuned to their ear, and deliver that message, and that becomes the bait, and they get interested. So we looked at it as too many times what was happening was the message that organizations were giving to their own people were the same exact messages that were being put out to their customers. And our take was the way that somebody in a call center or in a retail store might digest that information or need to use that information is very different than a consumer. Handing them a brochure and saying, here's all the information about it, well, their intent, the way they use that information is very different than the way the customer is going to process the same details. So we looked at it and said, okay, rather than training people on trying to get them all to say the same thing every single time, which we know doesn't work, what if you ran marketing campaigns instead? What if you asked them what they think? You learned what they think. You built a point of view of what you want to say and how they want to be reached. You merge those two things together, and then you run campaigns inside the company to influence behavior rather than try to drive compliance. So that's sort of the core foundation of our business is we run that internal marketing research to gain a point of view, and that way companies aren't guessing what information their people want to hear or what they need to hear. They know, they have data, and they can build data-based campaigns to reach their folks and influence their behavior.
Just on data, because the sort of old adage of marketing is only useful if you can collect data and actually can report on it. So did your MBA help you with those sorts of things to be able to understand those sorts of reports, that sort of data analytics? So
the answer is yes, it definitely did. I will tell you that it gave me a baseline. It gave me vocabulary. Getting in the trenches, early on, when I started my business, I sort of had, baptism by fire as a consultant with a big client. And there's no substitute for just having to get in it and look at it and know what the reports mean, understand what, sales channel reporting looks like, being able to dissect it a lot of different ways. I would love to say, yeah, I learned all that in my MBA, but I learned a baseline that helped support me in doing the applied work, but it really was the work in the trenches that sort of got me to the point where I could look at it and say, here's what this data is telling me, and give them a whole story just through the numbers.
Okay. What strategies do you use to increase revenue?
For our business or for our clients?
For your clients' businesses. Well, let's start with your clients and then we can talk about your revenue.
Yeah, for our clients, our primary focus is our primary strategy is if you can increase the person talking to the customer, if you can increase their ability to explain your value proposition and deliver on your brand proposition, your brand story, you are going to set yourselves apart more and you're going to win more deals. And that's a long way of saying conversion rate is the primary strategy that we have with the companies we work with. We talk to marketers and we say, if you drive X amount of demand, how much value is there in 3% more conversion, 5% more conversion? Yeah. We've done as much as 33% greater conversion for major consumer brands. So our play is 100%. If we go in and we can get people bought into your story and they can tell it more accurately, more effectively, your customer experience is going to improve. And ultimately, they're going to convert sales at a higher percentage. And it proves in every time we do it.
Interesting. So how do you do it for your own business? How have you structured your revenue growth and your revenue generation?
Can you ask that one more time? I had a little bit of a buffering situation. Can you ask that once more, please?
So how do you approach the strategy for your business to increase revenue?
So we, having done this, this is our third time doing it. We've learned a lot about what it takes to be a small business, especially a B2B, consultancy and service provider. And, our primary objective is, one is we have to have a unique story and a unique value proposition that goes back to what we said before. The strategy really is built around trying to solve a problem that marketers frequently have. And a lot of times the problem seems too hard or too daunting to tackle. So, the strategy really is have a unique value proposition that once people are exposed to it, the heads start nodding. They're like, yes, we struggle with this all the time. We launch new products. Nobody knows how to talk about it. Everybody thinks they're their own marketer. And I talked to somebody recently and they said, we have 500 salespeople and we have 500 different versions of the story. Nobody's telling it the same. No two people are telling it the same way. So we wanted to get really focused on the value propositions, but in terms of actually generating revenue, we are trying to get that out in front of people in really unique and creative ways. We do a lot of thought leadership and content marketing, sort of like what we're talking about today. But we'll also do a lot of, we do some more guerrilla style tactics. We've landed clients through direct mail campaigns. We believe our message is unique. We invest heavily to get our message out there to decision makers. And we're not doing it through the what are today the traditional means of heavy social media advertising. And we're doing some SEO, but we're not the type of service you wake up one day and say, I need to Google search brand alignment today. We really try to get our message proactively in front of decision makers. So a lot of it really ends up being direct mail. We do some events. We do a lot of sort of special surprise and delight work with our current clients, which leads to some referrals and things like that. So it's really just trying to get our story out in front of as many people as we can.
And so let's just delve a little bit into social media. Why have you not approached social media? Because especially LinkedIn, for example, is very heavy on the right sort of market and the thought leadership side. Yep. Do you use social media at all?
So I sort of excluded LinkedIn primarily because I look at LinkedIn as much more of a professional platform than a traditional social media. So we are heavy LinkedIn users. So that platform has been a key part of our strategy. So thanks for keeping me honest. We absolutely do use LinkedIn. Outside of that, we found that other social platforms, for the audience we're trying to reach, it's just difficult to reach them through, some are on Instagram, but we're not an Instagram our business is not tailor-made for Instagram. We are on Twitter. We're active on Twitter. Facebook is not a primary channel for us. It's just not where our buyers are necessarily. So we're trying to be in trade publications, and LinkedIn are primarily the place. In larger publications. We've been in HBR, we've been in Forbes, we've been in Inc. magazine. So trying to target the publications that people are going to be reading.
And what's your approach on thought leadership? So you've obviously, from what we've discussed so far, you think deeply about sales and marketing and employee engagement. How do you approach thought leadership and sort of getting your message out there in that domain?
Yeah, we think our message has to be unique. We think it has to be something that is noteworthy, and there's a lot of people saying the same thing. And right now, that's even more true. If you look at LinkedIn right now during the COVID period, that's even more true now. But we believe that our perspective is unique, and if that does not come through in the materials that we create or the conversations we have, like the one I'm having with you, it's just not going to be interesting. It has to be somewhat provocative. Our job is we see our job in thought leadership is to provoke thought, right? To get people thinking and say, I never really would have looked at it that way. I was on a podcast recently, and there were a lot of comments after the podcast posted, and people were like, I never really looked at it that way, but it's so simple when you think about the relationship between the brand and the employees and the customer experience. So we want to both be provocative, but also make the complicated seem simple, right? That there's elegance in making complicated concepts seem simple. And a lot of times these concepts seem like they're too big to tackle, but if you look at it the right way, they're really not that complicated.
So what you've said so far makes me think of one of Seth Godin's books, Purple Cow.
Yep.
Making something indistinguishable from the rest of the market. Is that something you've read? Is that something you subscribe to?
So I'm a huge Seth Godin fan. I would say Seth is my guru of choice. There's somehow, no matter what he writes, it always seems to speak to me personally. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Seth. I would say, really what it came down to was, I'm going to go back to that word value. When we built the company, we have been maniacally focused on the people that we serve are the people that represent large brands all over the world. Those are the people we serve. That's our customer. We look at the salespeople, the customer service reps, the retail associates, the technicians, the people who ride around in vans. We have a client that's in the pest control business, global pest control provider. We look at that person who goes out and sprays at your home. That's our customer. And if we can stay focused on reaching them in new and innovative ways and almost treating them like the customer, the way that marketers treat the buyer like the customer, if we can reach them in new and compelling ways, we're going to change their behavior. So we have always remained focused on how do we reach that person in a new way, because that's what we thought was broken. We truly believe that the modern approach to training is just not where it needs to be. It's not enough. It's not enough to reach the employee of today, or at least compel them to be a true advocate for the brand. So we maintain real focus on delivering that value of reaching that person with a compelling message and inspiring them to do their work each day. So that really helps us stay focused. So it really wasn't a book or a management philosophy that drove it. It really was blocking and tackling. Who do we serve? How can we stay focused on reaching them? And that's what we do every day.
I think it's a really different view of approach in marketing to actually think that one of the critical points of this is actually the employees. I think your business is unique. It's not the usual route for marketers. I've interviewed various marketing experts in various different environments, and they don't often talk about employees as being a critical or possibly one of the most important parts of the jigsaw puzzle.
They're walking billboards. Yeah. If you think about it, they're walking billboards. And, we've said, ever since we started the organization, we've talked about, how every marketing department says that they're understaffed, they're under-resourced. Well, they don't look at those customer-facing representatives as extensions of their marketing team. And when marketers are judged on results, and let's face it, marketers are going to be judged more on results, today. Like the increasing accountability in the marketing department is a trend that's been over the last decade, but it only continues to increase in sort of this post-social media world that we're in, where people want results, not just likes. And we look at it and say, if you're going to spend X amount on that campaign, if you back up that bet on the campaign with 10 or 15% and making sure that your people understand the campaign, believe in the campaign, your ability to drive results off of that campaign are going to go way up. And how are you going to measure it? You're going to measure it through conversion. Well, if conversion goes up, what happens to cost to acquire? Cost to acquire goes down. Every sale that you convert with the same dollar spent, that drives down your cost to acquire, which is the holy grail for marketers, nowadays. So we look at it as the path to marketing efficiency and marketing performance. One of the paths that they haven't explored enough is really on the, how the employee as a marketing channel, so to speak. But we think in a post-coronavirus world or during coronavirus, we think that's only getting magnified significantly.
Yeah, and I've spoken to a couple of my friends are in investment, which is totally different to your market, but they've been saying to their clients, sit tight, sit on the cash, get through the COVID-19 crisis, and you'll come out the other end and you'll be able to thrive. And I was talking to, I sort of talked to one of my sort of friends and sort of give him a bit of coaching, and I was saying to him, if you work with these people through COVID-19 and you give them really sound, good advice, they'll be a lifelong client. And I think you're sort of saying a similar message in the marketing world, that if you give the right message to your employees and to your customers, they'll stick with you when we come out of this crisis.
So you just illustrated a great point. So I will say yes, but here's how you illustrate a great point there. Think about organizations right now that if their marketing department pivots into their coronavirus messaging or their post-coronavirus messaging, and they go heavy on that, and then they don't invest in making sure that story, that message is pulled through their organization, and their retail associates, their customer service team is not completely dialed into that message, think about how much trust will be lost. We're in this era where trust is currency. Yeah. And 100%. If you're going to maintain that trust with your customers, making sure that what you're telling them is woven throughout your organization, you can actually back up that story. Before, you could sort of slide by, but the competition for customers is going to be fierce. And the people that are authentically delivering on an experience that they promised, authentically delivering on a brand message, and have employees who can deliver that message from the inside of the organization out, those are the ones that are going to stand out. You actually have to mean it now, right? We talked to a CMO one time, and she was going through a rebrand, and she said, I know we're going to be able to talk the talk. My concern is, are we going to be able to walk the talk? That's what she said. Well, I'm going to be concerned that we're going to walk the talk. In a post-coronavirus world, or as we're sort of hopefully getting toward the end of this, organizations that can't walk the talk are going to be left in the dust.
Has your business pivoted in any way in this crisis, in the pandemic?
I would say slightly. Not to any great extent. I would say that we are doing more, gathering information from teams around, what their view is of the coronavirus, how they're doing, that type of thing. So I would say kind of loosening the rigor of our typical brand transfer study, data collection process, going more toward the survey route. But I would say the biggest pivot has been really ramping up our efforts to support teams remotely. A lot of the work that we did really was in person, people going into employee sites. We have done extensive remote work in the past, but it wasn't something necessary. It was more out of necessity of the company than it was truly a business strategy. Well, work from home is going to be a business strategy for organizations going forward. So we've really ramped up sort of the tactic set that we have to engage a work from home audience.
Oh, good. Would you say that, I don't know what your sort of percentages of your clients are. The majority of them corporates, or are any of them, as in the US, you call them SMBs? We call them SMEs in the UK.
Primarily corporate. We don't have the small, medium-sized business. Our typical client is more of an enterprise, 500 million US in revenue and above.
Okay. And one of the things you've talked about I read an article that you wrote on LinkedIn about brand dilution. What do you mean by the term brand dilution?
Yeah, really going back to what I was saying before, that idea of what goes on the billboard and attracts the customer, or on the television commercial or on the digital ad, and what the customer sees and hears when they actually interact with the customer, or I'm sorry, with the company. So that's the, hey, I saw a billboard. I need a new wireless phone. I'm going to go into that store this weekend and I'm going to check it out. What they see on the billboard and what they hear in the store, the dilution is the difference between what they see and what they hear.
Right.
And making sure that the people who represent the brand are aligned to that overall brand message and that overall brand story. Or in some cases, it might be the campaign. How many times have you ever, walked into a store or called somebody and said, I want the so-and-so deal? And they're like, huh? What deal? I haven't seen that yet. And, whether it's a car or whether it's a phone or a lot of different consumer products, the deal you see through advertising, the people at the front lines have no idea what that is. That's the dilution we're talking about. Okay. If you can't stitch together that story across all your customer touch points, that's where that dilution comes in.
So just to explore the mobile phone for a minute. So let's just say you're driving along and you see an advert for, let's leave Apple out of this conversation, because I think, as we talked about, there's a great brand loyalty there. So you see a Motorola phone, and it's advertised on EE or whatever your providers are, and you see that Motorola phone, but you go into the same store and you then get talked into a Samsung or a different brand. How do companies sort of navigate that, where companies like mobile phones might have an influx of a particular brand which they need to sell, and so they're putting a lot of money into this advertising to get their message out there, but then the retail people are selling a different story?
Didn't you just make a case for why they should invest in marketing to the retail associate too? I mean, So brand switching is a huge part of what we're doing in work, especially with companies that are more B2B to C. And I look at the wireless companies as B2B to C organizations, right? They sell into the wireless carrier, then the wireless carrier has their stores. But we have somebody on our team with extensive experience in that world, and their company invested, a lot of money in campaigns to reach that retail associate. And if you're not driving preference with the retail associate, they can switch you all day long. The demand generation marketing that you're doing to drive foot traffic to ask for your phone, if they're switching you out 9 times out of 10 because they either believe in the brand better or they're providing better incentives to sell the other brand, you're in real trouble. So we look at it as, if you want your marketing to be successful, you've got to make sure you look at any place where that connection point could really fall out. Where are the fallout points? Where's our risk? At each point along the customer journey, where's our risk? We think that there's an investment that's worthwhile with that retail associate to say, we need to convince, we're not going to just give them a spiff to sell this or give them an incentive to sell an extra handset. It has to be, how do we actually get them to believe how good this phone is? It's a different mentality. A lot of companies throw incentives at things, but really getting them to believe, that's how you get loyalty.
Well, that's interesting, because you think about like sort of price points, and you talked about incentives for companies, and I always think that if your major point on making a sale is that you are cheaper than your competitor, that's only a short-term strategy that only gets you so far, because that someone will undercut you at some stage. It's not a great strategy. How do you formulate those sorts of strategies to touch base on all those different facets, the employee, as you said, the retail association, the companies that are selling your products online? Would you, when you sit down with your client initially, would you map out that strategy from end to end?
So what we do is we work with the strategy they already have, but what we have to do is work to understand it. So we sit down with them and we say, okay, how are you competing in the marketplace? What are all the ways you can compete? What are the ways, and we do this through our data tool. So we do an alignment exercise where we find out, if you're buying a mobile phone, what are the top 12 to 14 attributes of a mobile phone that are going to drive 95% of a customer's decision? We sit down and we map those out. And then we work with them and we say, okay, which ones do you think, where do you think you stand out? Where do you think you stand out versus the competition? We get a point of view on that. Then we ask those same questions to their frontline associates, and then we compare. We compare the point of view of the corporate marketing teams and the brand folks with the people who are talking to customers. That's how we measure the dilution. We do a statistical analysis of how closely aligned their answers are, and that's how we give them an actual numeric measure of how much their message is diluted.
It's really interesting because I think a lot of businesses don't always think about the whole of the end-to-end process. How does risk factor into your business? Do you do sort of risk assessments? Do you do risk management on potential? So for me, risk management means more of a compliance. But from what I'm asking a question is, does risk management play into your strategy, where you understand where the missing points of the jigsaw are and things like that?
So to some degree, I would say that from a risk management perspective, a lot of times what we're doing with clients is we're building business cases around the work that we do. The work we do, it has to at least be revenue neutral. And frankly, in most cases, we're not even pitching business that we don't think is going to be a 5 to 20 times return on investment from what they spend with us. So a lot of times we're going in and we're trying to understand their metrics. So we're trying to look at the risk assessment really becomes, we're assessing how risky it is for them to hire us and saying, okay, if we improve by 3%, that would be X times greater than the work we do. We've actually done work where we've done guarantees on our work, where we've put a portion of our fee at risk to against performance benchmarks and hit those every single time. So from a risk perspective, a lot of times what it ends up being is either assessing the risk of hiring us or, frankly, assessing the risk of not hiring us. So we're looking at it saying, how do you typically perform on a major initiative like this? Well, if you miss by 10%, what does that look like? Yeah. If you miss by 15%, we've gone into organizations where their plan that they were missing by 90% of their plan. They had initiatives that were completely dying on the vine. So a lot of times the risk assessment becomes, can you afford to have a new program, a new campaign that you're spending multi-million dollars to launch via marketing and advertising fall flat because you don't execute on it? Yeah. We become sort of that executional risk analysis.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. It's been fascinating talking to you. Coming to the end of the interview, I asked 5 questions to every one of my guests. They're quick fire questions, but they don't need a quick fire answer. Okay. What was the best decision that you've made?
Best decision I've made is convincing my partner to join for 10 hours, then 25 hours, then 60 plus hours. Yeah, joining forces with my partner has been the absolute best decision I've made as an entrepreneur.
What's the best piece of advice that you've given, that someone's given you?
Best piece of advice that somebody's given me. I would say right now, I mentioned a friend, an advisor of ours who is at Harvard Business School. He's harped on us since day one to be really smart about fixed cost in building a business and trying to find ways. He keeps saying, build the 21st century firm, right? Build the 21st century firm, which is, networked together through a series of partners and software providers, and you don't necessarily need to go hire an HR person right away. There's software that can help you manage. So the idea of stitching together a 21st century firm that manages fixed costs in a smart way that's sort of a mantra of ours day in and day out, and that's served us really well.
Good. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
Helped me the most in my career? I'm going to say my older brother. My older brother has been probably the most motivating. He's my best muse, and probably I'm his as well. He was calling me while we were on this call. But I would say my older brother has been somebody that's always, kind of driven me to strive in my career and not be afraid to sort of take some shots, to use an overused phrase, speak truth to power a little bit, not be afraid to speak up when I saw opportunities. We sort of are always looking for ways to tinker and improve things. And he's always inspired that in me. So I'm going with my older brother.
Awesome. Any regrets?
I'm not a big regret person. I sort of make my decision in the moment and live with it. I would say probably the only thing would be not taking bigger risks sooner in my career.
Okay. What are you most proud of?
Most proud of, personally or as an entrepreneur?
Whatever you like.
I'll go with entrepreneur for the business people listening. Just like any business owner, we've had our ups and downs over the years, and you have your good times, you have your bad, you have your big wins, you have your crushing defeats. And, there have been times where we've hired a lot of people. There's been times where we've had to let people go. And I would say the thing I'm probably the most proud of is of the many dozens or hundreds of people that we have employed over the years, whether it's trading an email or bumping into them in an airport. The level of respect that we still have with all those people, even folks that we had to lay off, there are people that I've fired before, like terminated, that still reach out to me on LinkedIn, ask me for advice, send me emails, send me Christmas cards. And that goes for my business partner as well. I think the level of authenticity that we've led with is sort of proven out, with those relationships with those people. So I would say sort of those enduring relationships with the people that have worked for us has been the best indicator that we've done something right.
So I'm now going to do something which I've never done before on my podcast, but I was just inspired by something that you said. So relationships. Do you think that relationships are the key to your success? As a consultant, I would imagine they're probably quite strong in your thought process. But I was talking to someone on a podcast, and they were saying that 9/10 of their business and their success has been based on relationships, building relationships, long-standing relationships, versus 1/10, which is hustle, grind, the sort of thing that would you agree with those sorts of metrics?
So I'm going to agree to a point. I'm going to put an asterisk on relationships. I believe relationships are extremely important. I believe that any good relationship, personal or professional, comes with periods where somebody has to tell the other side something they don't want to hear because it's in their best interest. And we know a lot of people, we work with organizations who have salespeople that say, oh, I've got great relationships. And what they mean by relationships is they show up once every other week with donuts and their accounts love them and they hang out on each other's porches and drink beers together. I don't believe that that's a 21st century relationship. I think that there's a difference between a friendship and the type of business relationship you're alluding to. And I think that a 21st century business relationship has hard times. And I think that the hard times in some cases come from one side pushing the other or forcing the other to have to deal with a reality that's not comfortable to them. And if you don't want to be in those types of relationships, don't be an entrepreneur, because you have to push. We're doing it now during a lot of the coronavirus stuff, is pushing clients to say, you've got to think bigger. Relationships, you build up some relationship capital and some equity. You have to be willing to spend it to tell people things that are hard for them to hear, or else it's not a real relationship, in my opinion.
And that's all based on what you were saying earlier about trust. If people trust you and trust your view, they will take the challenge and take it on positively rather than thinking it's an attack on their business.
We've all had somebody in our personal lives tell us something that was hard to hear, right? And they did it because it was tough. Love is part of a good relationship. It really is. And I think that whether you're the provider or you're the buyer, whether you're the vendor or the buyer, those relationships, it really doesn't matter what business it is. I do believe that relationships are the key. They really are, but they have to be trust-based, really, mutual relationships. It can't, showing up and buying donuts, somebody does not have a relationship with them. Yeah. Telling them how to run, helping them find ways to run a better business and challenging them things that they're doing that might be outdated and hurting their business. If you're not trying to help them, you don't have the relationship with them that you think.
Yeah. And as a consultant, that's often part of your job, is telling people the hard truths and how you can be successful with working with you.
It's true.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Chris. That's been really, really interesting. I think when we talked before, you said you wanted to be thoughtful on how you talked about your business, and I would 100% agree that I think we've gone into areas of marketing and sales which I probably haven't done with a lot of other people that I've been talking to about marketing. So where can people find you, Chris? On social media, on LinkedIn, or a website?
Yeah, so me personally, LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm there. I'm happy to chat with folks, engage via LinkedIn. You'll find me. It'll be Chris Wallace, and you'll find me Interview Group. It's INNER, as in taking an inner look at your organization. You know, that's sort of our play on words there. But Interview Group, and when you look for Chris Wallace, look in Philadelphia. There's a lot of Chris Wallaces. I share a name with some famous people and a lot of other random people. So Philadelphia is where I'm based, so you'll find me in Philadelphia. And then the company's website is interviewgroup.com. And again, it's INNERVIEW, interviewgroup.com.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate your time.
Mark, thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot.